Are you familiar with FBI Special Agents Kyle Seraphin?
I'm familiar with the name.
Is that yes?
I'm familiar with the name.
Let's bring in Kyle Seraphin. He's the FBI whistleblower who helped expose government censorship of our First Amendment rights.
Now, we only have this memo because a recently suspended FBI agent called Kyle Seraphin brought it to the public. And we're grateful that he did. Kyle, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
He's the host of something that strangely is called the Kyle Seraphin Show.
Kyle Seraphin, I can't thank you enough for speaking out. I knew you guys were out there, and I knew it was just a matter of time, but you got a lot of guts putting your face and your name to this. You're doing a service on behalf of the American people, and from the bottom of my cracked and broken heart sometimes, thank you very much.
Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. Today is Thursday. It is May the 30th, and we have a fantastic show lined up for you with my dear friend, investigative reporter, suspendable buddy, Steve Baker. He's going to be joining us today and talking to us about the method. I proposed that we talk about this the other day, and he was amenable to it. So he's been doing some background research. You guys will get a little kick out of some of this stuff. I'm digging deep into my weird archives. I actually thought that I was going to be a film student at some point in my life, and I watched a bunch of weird, kind of off-brand movies that many of you will not remember from the 80s and 90s. It was something I like to dig into with the people, and one of my best friends became a screenwriter. So that was kind of my formation in weird Hollywood stuff. I think Steve will get a big kick out of this. You guys will as well. Let's say thanks real quick to the friends over at CatholicVote.org. You guys can go to store.catholicvote.org and get yourself a copy of For God, Country, and Sanity, of which I wrote one of the chapters. You guys can find the other chapters as well. It's edited by my friend Brian Birch, who's the president of Catholic Vote. It is a kind of a blueprint and a discussion of the existing problems and maybe some solutions that we can have as we cruise towards this very strange election. We'll obviously be monitoring what's going on out in New York as well, which is going to be a game changer for this country one way or another, because we're coming to the culmination of a trial that probably should have never happened. Not probably, definitely. Follow Catholic Vote and my friends over there at CatholicVote.org. Make sure you're getting the loop. If you're not getting your news today from us, that's a good place to go and do that. A couple other things here. Let's say thanks to buddies over at Patriot Coolers. Get that going. Look, I didn't even put it on the screen because I have the real one with me. This is the engraved one. I got to send one to Steve, actually. I'm going to send him a travel mug with this sucker. This is one of our custom engraved Patriot Cooler tumblers. You can use promo code Kyle, K-Y-L-E, 10% off using those 4 little letters. And actually, I just got a great little review from my friend George Hill, fellow suspendable, who picked up one of the big coolers for what he called glamping. Now, he's got that Marine mentality, so he's always going to assume that everything should be harder than it is. That's the way that he rolls. And that's going to be it for our ad reads for now. We'll come back to some other sponsors a little bit later. Let's get right to it with my buddy and suspendable and investigative journalist. There he is, Steve Baker. We're on kind of a sketchy hotel Wi-Fi connection today, aren't we?
Yeah, man, I am in full hotel room glory. In fact, I've got my hotel room.
Of course, it started sketching out.
As soon as you can get that over to me, that's great.
Yeah, we'll work on giving you something to carry around with you. You just need one more. The only thing that's key when you're carrying your own tumbler through any. Well, you don't do a lot of airports, do you? You do mostly driving.
No, yeah, I'm not a flying kind of guy, not anymore.
So there you go. So when you're dealing with it on a when you're dealing with it through the airport, you got to make sure you always dump it out before you get there. Otherwise, they yell at you for having coffee, because that's
right.
That's how freedom is done today. We're going to talk a little bit today about the method. I gave you some background and some homework. You did a little bit of watching of some of this stuff. Let me see if you can articulate who is the number one detective in the world, real or imagined.
Oh, wow.
The greatest detective in history.
I mean, it's got to be Sherlock Holmes.
It's got to be Sherlock Holmes. Survey says Sherlock Holmes. Who else could be the number one other than Sherlock? He's the most famous detective of all time, coming from, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's 1887 original novel. So you nailed that one. And all great detective stories since that time have kind of gone and appealed to be Sherlock Holmes type characters. And that's what the method comes from. Can I play this video clip and we're going to get people warmed up about what we're going to be talking about? All right. This comes from a 1998 film called Zero Effect that none of you have seen, or very few of you have seen. It stars Bill Pullman and Ben Stiller. It's got an all-star cast. It's very, very good. It's super weird. And here is the method as described by Bill Pullman.
I begin my examination of the method. I always say that the essence of my work relies fundamentally on two basic principles: objectivity and observation, or the two OBS, as I call them. My work relies on my ability to remain absolutely, purely objective, detached. I have mastered the fine art of detachment. And while it comes at some cost, this supreme objectivity is what makes me, I dare say, the greatest observer the world has ever known.
Are you possibly related to Bill Pullman? I saw some similarities in the facial structure there with that hair like that.
Yeah, maybe a little bit. Distant relative.
What do you think about the two OBS? Objectivity. What's the other one he said? Observation. Being detached. Let's talk about that when we talk about looking for truth.
I think the first and the most important thing is you just have to not give a shit. You have to not care. I mean, that's the nature of I think any good investigative agent, detective, reporter, whatever, is you cannot have an aversion to where the lead might take you. You can't be if the journey is going to take you where you don't want to be because it doesn't meet your worldview, your presuppositions, your predispositions toward whatever the conclusion might be, because we all have those. I mean, it doesn't matter what I go into. I kind of, we have our inherent biases, and no matter what I'm going into, I don't necessarily have a hoped for conclusion to the journey, to the investigative journey process, but I do have a presupposition of where it might take me. But what has to happen is along that path, that objectivity, the other ob, during those observations as we're working through it, I have to be able to go, okay, this is not taking me where I want to go, but this is where we're going.
This is the core of the scientific method as well, is that you find a hypothesis and then you set up experiments attempting to disprove the hypothesis. And if you're unable to do so, then you keep that hypothesis and you continue to sort of investigate it further, but you kind of move it into a more, special place because it is now a tested hypothesis. I like not giving a damn. I like the idea that you must sort of be aloof, detached. There's an antisocial character, and interestingly enough, Sherlock Holmes is like either autistic or socially retarded, or call it whatever you want. He's that guy that just says things that upset people. And all the great detectives have kind of been that person. Nobody likes them because they find out inconvenient truth. It's sort of the nature of doing that work. Yeah.
Yeah. And my second favorite behind, and I wouldn't call him the greatest detective or even the second greatest detective of all time, but my second favorite would be Columbo. Mm-hmm. For the very same reason that obviously he's on the spectrum. There's something wrong with him, but he can't let go of the bone once he's got hold of it. And that's the thing that makes people mad and scares them. It's like, I thought I had him at bay. I thought I had pushed him away from me. I thought I had gotten him off of my scent, but nope, he's back again. He's back at the door again.
Where does that instinct to hold on to that bone and keep digging, where does that come from, do you think? What sort of character trait is that?
Well, if we're not talking about, the people that are special, be they Asperger's, autism, somewhere on the spectrum, if we're not talking about those people, I mean, only thing I can tell you is just from experience that once I get a hold of something that I am doggedly in pursuit of, and I've got that bone, it for me, I do want to be right. I want to get it right no matter where it takes me. And I want to have the exact.
This hotel Wi-Fi is not my favorite. We're going to have to find
testimonies, whatever the case may be. I desperately want it to be right. And that's what, drives me.
Is this what Ben Shapiro calls facts over feelings?
Yeah, I mean that's a absolute fair observation, and really that's what you and I had decided to talk about was there's this conflict that we have today, particularly in journalism and politics. Journalism and politics is that there is this notion of feelings trump everything. Feelings trump the method. Feelings are more important than being right. And, some of us have had to deal with that in the last week.
Let's talk about that in 1 second. Let's put one pin in the last week. I want to open up just a slightly larger thought about it all, which is to say, so many people now have crossed those streams of politics and journalism to the point where they are activists, not for truth specifically for its own sake, but they are activists for outcomes. They are looking to sway the needle of public opinion, and that means that inconvenient fact has to be discarded, and anybody who is going to be sort of purveying them is looked at as an enemy. That's what's going on at the Blaze for you guys right now. It looks like people are taking shots at you. I've seen people say that you're aligned with DeSantis. The minute that you don't follow whatever the narrative comes out as, then suddenly you must be playing for a different team because it's tribe over truth, which is an episode we did a couple days ago.
Isn't it amazing that for a group of our fellow wanderers have decided that the biggest insult that they can hurl at me or you or anybody else that they're not in 100% lockstep agreement with is to call us DeSantis simp, the most successful governor in maybe the history of our country, in terms of instituting conservative values and law and protections over liberty. I mean, that is the insult that I'm supposed to be, horrified by and recoil from. I mean, absolutely not. Yeah. Now, why do they think that about me? Okay. First of all, it's because during the primary season, I never posted a DeSantis campaign video or sticker or button. I never wore the lapel pin or anything else. Like the Trump flag. So therefore, I must be that guy.
Well, especially if you don't say everything that I want you to say right when you're supposed to say it. If you don't step up into the space and echo whatever line is being handed out that everybody else is on, then you're the problem.
And during the primary, I was, in fact, a DeSantis supporter. If I had been able to vote while he was still a viable candidate, and during the North Carolina primary, I certainly would have voted for DeSantis at that time. That's not to say that I was not going to eventually carry the banner of whoever won the GOP nomination, because more important to me right now than who is leading that ticket is stopping the Biden administration. Okay, that's the single most important thing to me right now. Also,
let's hone in on that for 1 second, though, if you don't mind, because I want to direct you towards something specific. Bona fides. You referenced it very briefly on social media a few times. Would it be fair to say that specifically guys like you and I, we've got some real skin in this game when it comes to not seeing a weaponized DOJ and Biden administration continuing on their path? You want to talk about some of yours? Not everybody knows your story, folks. I highly recommend you guys go look up Steve Baker. You can find him TPC, the number 4 USA on any of the social media platforms. But Steve, and there's plenty on my channel as well. But if you don't know all about Steve's going to give you just maybe the liner notes on this one. What do you got in the game here?
Yeah. Right. Well, this is exactly where I was going to go before you set me up even better. Was the fact is that for the first time in my life, I am a single issue voter this time. I've never been that kind of person.
Yep.
I've always weighed all of the druthers of a particular candidate, all the issues. This time, there's only one candidate out there who says that I am going to pardon all the nonviolent J6ers. And I am one of those. Because of my coverage on January 6th, I was arrested March 1st of this year after over 3 years of Federal Bureau of Investigative, work and delving into every aspect of my life and tracking every inch of my journey on January 6th. They could never quite find that felony charge, but they were like, damn it, we're going to hit him with something. So they gave me the 4 basic misdemeanors. And then, of course, our weaponized DOJ did something that you could speak to much better than I can, is they sent me over to an FBI field office to self-present. They did not knock down my door. They did not come at me with the red dots. They didn't shoot my dog. But what they did do is they required me to show up and present myself, whereupon the FBI handcuffed me, took me in a car down to the federal courthouse in downtown Dallas, transferred me to the U.S. Marshals, who then proceeded to put me in leg chains for, let me say it again, 4 nonviolent misdemeanor charges. Basically, for a glorified trespassing charge that day, I got leg chains in the humiliation of being marched in front of a magistrate to answer for my misdemeanor terrorism, as I like to now refer to it.
I like misdemeanor terrorism. People will be surprised to learn, if they've listened to our show the other day, maybe yesterday, the day before, I did a 20-minute bit explaining what is so important, which is to say that terrorism charges in the United States oftentimes do not actually have an underlying crime. It's just an ideology that they have managed to associate you with. So being a quote-unquote domestic violent extremist doesn't mean that you're violent and doesn't mean that you're necessarily extreme. It could actually be a mainstream thing that you're interested in. There doesn't have to be an underlying crime for them to create an intelligence type investigation with national security tools. I think you're very accurate with the 4 misdemeanor terrorisms. I'm sure there is some sort of national security case on you as well. In that 266 Oscar vein, which we found, the anti-government, anti-authority violent extremist, because God forbid, Steve, you don't just take the government's word for everything, which is kind of what I thought journalists were supposed to do. Did we lose you?
No, can you hear me?
I can.
I'm getting this bad hotel Wi-Fi freeze ups going on.
It is the nature of a live show.
I don't know if I need to switch my Wi-Fi over to hotspotting off my phone or not. But are you able to? You got me now?
Yeah, you sound great. And if you want to switch it over, if that seems like it's going to be a little bit more stable, we can do that. I've got another clip we'll play for a second. It's another part of the method, but you tell me when you're ready to switch over.
Why don't you do that, and let me try a switch over and see if we get a better signal.
All right. So, folks, we're going to get Steve re-squared away on his connection. I'm going to play you a second little clip about the method. The key is, when you try to go find one thing, you might have a problem. If you're looking for that single piece of evidence that either proves or disproves your case, it's difficult. So a little piece here from Daryl Zero, which I think you guys will get a kick out of. Again, it's Bill Pullman doing this little bit. Here we go.
Now, a few words on looking for things. When you go looking for something specific, your chances of finding it are very bad. Because of all the things in the world, you're only looking for one of them. When you go looking for anything at all, your chances of finding it are very good. Because of all the things in the world, you're sure to find some of them.
It makes perfect sense, does it not? It's a simple and yet common sense idea that if you go looking for one thing, think about every time you've gone to go find your keys. And that's, by the way, that's what he's looking for in that scene. This whole movie is set up that a man lost his keys and he's trying to find them desperately, which seems really silly. It turns out there's a lot more at play. That's why the movie is fun. That's why it's interesting. They sort of slowly unveil what's going on and why this guy's keys are so important. But think about when you've lost your keys. You go everywhere and you're looking for them. And what do you find? You find all the other stuff that you were looking for the other day when you didn't lose your keys and you weren't looking for keys. You find, your wallet. You find the remote that you couldn't find for your TV the other day, and so on and so forth. Again, this is a scene from Zero Effect, and it's Bill Pullman's recreation, kind of an autistic-y, antisocial kind of weirdo who engages in this bizarre practice of being totally, it's his claim, is that he's totally detached from human interactions, which makes him horrific to be a colleague of and terrible to be around as a person. And yet he's very good at sussing out why is that? Because he just doesn't have the impositions that most people have, that he doesn't have the problem or the burden of trying to be social and friendly. That's not his issue. And it's worth knowing that when you have that kind of weird sense of being a guy who doesn't have to obey social norms, you don't have to get a specific outcome that makes somebody happy or do the right thing for them, then sure enough, you will be capable of more investigative material. You will be capable of doing a more detached observation. Now, there's a second piece to this that I think that movie misses, is that you also have to have a thing that's called empathy. And we're waiting. Steve just popped on, then he disappeared. So stand by with me, folks, here. Empathy is the other piece of it. Just because you can sit back and you can be detached and look at humanity as it falls out around you, that's actually very good. But you also have to be able to put yourself in the shoes of the person that you are trying to watch, that you're trying to learn about. You have to be able to understand how people interact. It's the biggest issue I have with what's being claimed right now and the sort of pushes on social media against guys like me and Steve Friend and Steve Baker even. Bill Shipley is in the same boat. The question is, are these guys just fed ops? That's objectively insulting to my children, to my wife, to my parents, to the family members and my friends who have supported us and kind of looked in on what we're doing. It's really offensive to think that the goal of all of this, discomfort that we've all engaged in, and Steve has gone to jail for it, and he spent a day getting processed. You've got Garrett O'Boyle was made homeless, and his kids were without jackets in the snow. Like, all of this stuff is not fun to be a part of, and yet you're going to make the claim that because we don't agree with you 100%, that we're all an operation, that we're involved in some sort of a fed op. That's terrible. That's a terrible claim. I'm just adding Steve back in here, so we'll see if we can get him on. All right, Mr. Baker, I think I've got you back. Let me see if I can hear you. Check.
Yeah. Check, 1, 2.
All right, I'm going to have to boost your audio, but we'll get it.
I don't know if we're any more stable or not.
I don't know either. I've got minimal audio coming from you. How about now?
I can hear you. I don't know if we're any more stable at this point, but we'll see what happens.
I like that we do weird stuff. Like you and I have talked while you were a man on the street hiding somewhere in on the East Coast, just trying to avoid things. You're a man moving at all times. Why are you always in different places, out of curiosity? What do you got going on?
Yeah, well, part of it that I do. And the other thing is that even though I technically now that I'm working for the Blaze, it's so I kind of bounce around here in this region for to be close to the headquarters for video work that we, and obviously to appear on some of the host shows, commentary, that sort of thing. But I guess the second most time other than Dallas is DC, because that's where so much of the work that I do where we're finding out the things that we are looking for.
You know what I want to do, Steve? I'm going to put you on a phone call because it'll be a cleaner audio, and I think that's more important. The video, even though I like seeing your smiling face.
That?
Does that make sense to you? I'm just going to put you on a phone call real quick, if that's okay. I'm going to.
Yeah,
hang with us here.
Hey,
I'm going to get Steve on the line here, since that's not a very stable connection, and we'll do audio only. I have a lot that we want to get into as far as this sort of method idea. So let me dial him up. This is the joy of doing a live show. Sometimes connections are not stable. Sometimes other things are going on, aren't they? So we will get that going right here. 2 seconds. All right, Mr. Baker, can you hear me? Give me 2 seconds to connect it to the board, and then we'll bring you on. Everybody should hear you in just a second here. 1, 2, 3, Rodecaster Pro. And check. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
All right, I've got you.
Beautiful. All right. Folks in the chat, give me a thumbs up. Make sure that we can, you guys can hear Steve as well. He should be coming in loud and clear at this point.
Well, hopefully you've got an image of me up there in one of my Bowie attire outfits.
In one of your what?
In one of my David Bowie outfits.
I don't have any Bowie. I need a Bowie picture of you. I need a default Bowie picture for all of our thumbnails. All right. So let's get deeper into this. Like I said, it cost you something. Let's talk about the whole Fed op, the sort of discussion that you are a problem specifically because you're not aligning with the narrative. We're getting the thumbs up and 5 by. So people are hearing you better.
Yeah, I'm look, it's no more complicated than this. I am now a Fed op.
Right.
As you are. I am controlled opposition. I am working for the deep state. I mean, just make. My favorite one was a couple of weeks ago. I found out I was on George Soros' payroll, which was, it was a pleasure to find that out. The only disappointment is nobody has given me my offshore bank account number yet, so I know where to access all these millions that he's, putting aside for me. So, but I mean, these are the kind of, ridiculous charges that are leveled at you if you just don't agree 100% of the time. And, in this particular situation, as he said, we were just going to touch on this week a little bit. And I don't want to get into the specifics of it because I don't want a pissing match with anybody.
Right.
But the bottom line is somebody who I praised their work on Monday. We're talking about this week, Kyle.
Yep.
Somebody for whom I gave public praise for their work on Monday got something really wrong on Tuesday.
Okay. And
I bit my lip. I was like, I'm sorry. I think I said it was this week. I think it was last week.
Yes,
so
last
Monday. Yeah, It was last Monday that I praised the work. It was Tuesday. The same person got something wrong. And I bit my lip for a couple of days. I refused to say anything, particularly publicly. But what I finally did is without naming names, I just said, the ridiculousness of this idea that there was going to be a shootout at the Mar-a-Lago Corral between, agents of the FBI and agents of the Secret Service, and that this was a planned bloodbath, that this was a quote-unquote assassination attempt of our former president, et cetera, hyperbole after hyperbole after hyperbole. And it escalated to some of our major, talk shows and punditry and mutual friends. And I finally said, and this is the only thing I tweeted, was, that Trump was in New York during the Mar-a-Lago raid? If that was an assassination attempt by the FBI, it was very poorly planned. And they went to the wrong facility, 1,000 miles or more away.
Right.
And that's all I said. And, oh man, the hell to pay for making just the simplest, most logical point about how it's like, Kyle, you're telling me that neither the FBI or the Secret Service knew where Trump was?
Well, the documents say that they did. So it's hard for me to believe any of that since they told us in their own words. Now, the thing that bothers me, and I think it's the reason why so many people don't, documents are written for a specific audience. And I've covered this on this program. I think you know this intrinsically as well, that when an audience is supposed to know what things mean, and another audience comes in and reads it. It's the equivalent of sitting at a table, and I know this. I talk to you all the time when you're out in public and you're having a cigar, or you're having a bourbon or something, and you'll do overhear of other people's conversation. How many things have you overheard in your years on the planet that you looked over and you were like, that was a really strange thing. Why is that person laughing?
Right.
Inside jokes are meant for an inside audience. They're meant for a group of people who understand what is at play. My wife and I have inside jokes. I'm sure that you and friends do as well. There are certain things that are only funny because you know context that is not available to the average listener. And so when you hear these folks looking at something without knowing what the background is, who haven't served hundreds of FBI search warrants, who haven't been part of hundreds of briefings on operations, maybe, in my case, thousands of operations in 23 of the FBI's 56 AORs, then maybe it does sound crazy, which is why you have sounding boards. If I had a question about music and performing, I'd reach out to my friends who are musicians. I'd reach out to you. I'd call my brother. I'd say, look, somebody said this thing about running a gig. Like, what is this all about? And they would go, oh, that's common language for this. Someone said we're going to do a hit on media. Like, are we killing somebody? And they would go, no, a hit just means it's a time for you to show up and be on a program. I go, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know, right? And so the audience matters. The intended audience matters.
I mean, it absolutely does. And you make an incredibly important point, and this is getting us back to the method here. If you are going to be called into doing something in an area that you're not the expert, or you're not 100% familiar with, or you're, maybe iffy around the edge, even around the edges, the first thing that you do is you get somebody on the phone who is an expert in that area that you trust, and you run the scenario by them, and you get their input. And then maybe you do it again, and then maybe you do it again 3 times. And this is one of the most important keys to the method. And this is why we had the blow up last week, is that somebody did not, there's one of 2 things that happened. I'm going to back up here. And I wish I could see your face right now, because that reaction, I think, is going to be important here, is that I either, when I am not sure of the direction or that I'm going in, or the method or the process that I should take, I get on the phone with somebody who I trust, who's better at this than me, more experienced than I am, and I get their input. And the other time that somebody might get on the phone to talk to somebody to get input or planning is if it's something you are, in fact, engaged in an operation with. And with
when you have some sort of momentary lack of discretion, when you are emotionally and personally involved in it, would that be accurate?
Yeah, or there is a look. I'm going to call a spade, Kyle. I can't avoid everything that I'm trying to dance around right now.
Yeah, don't.
But there are times when people on the right are involved in just as prolific a disinformation operation as we blame people on the left. There, I said it.
So this just got put out. You shared with me this morning. I want to kind of get to your piece that you wrote for Blaze, because I think it's relevant and it's also pretty important. Here's a little thing we're throwing on the screen here. So we're talking about this tweet from Julie Kelly, which just came out this morning. This was the latest shot. By the way, I have not engaged with Julie Kelly since, I think, May 21st, because I don't care. I interacted with her privately and told her I really don't think that you should be staking your career on this. And she said something pretty nasty. You're not going to win on this fight. So my answer was, enjoy your clicks. That's the actual quote that I have. And I thanked her for convincing me to get off social media, which I've been off mostly for the last 10 days. My life is way better. I've been doing way better things. This is what she wrote. She said, if you're starting to suspect that former feds and out of the blue influencers with social media platforms, I feel like we're both being named here, are involved in an op to make it look like pro-MAGA supporters in any way support the legal warfare against Trump, trust your instincts. We've seen this movie before, especially related to defending the FBI and DOJ. What in the world? But I also quoted your article where they noted some of the tweets that were coming from people on the right that are punching this rhetoric up. This is Marjorie Taylor Greene, Republican, Georgia, tweeted, the Biden DOJ and FBI were planning to assassinate President Trump and gave the green light. Does everyone get it yet? A lot of different, emotional, exclamation points and question marks. And then you've got Paul Gosar, who generally speaking is pretty balanced, I think, from the stuff I've seen. Republican out of Arizona saying Biden ordered the hit on Trump at Mar-a-Lago, end quote. Let's talk about your piece here. I'm going to throw it up on the screen here so people can see it. Oh, I don't know what that was. Sorry about that, buddy. That was really weird. I have a couple of things I'm playing with apparently. So, all right. So we've got your article on the screen and people can see it. It says, the Blaze Media, logically laughable. Steve Baker puts the final nails in the coffin of the so-called Mar-a-Lago assassination narrative. This was written by Joseph McKinnon. Who is Joseph?
He's one of our news writers at the Blaze.
Okay. So tell me about what this story is all about. And you quoted it the other day on Twitter. This is kind of your only piece that's like stepped into this sphere. I mean, this is the method. We just look at the facts, right? I mean, you had an entire thread that shared documents, things we look for.
And people are mad at me by the hundreds of thousands right now because they say that I was attacking Julie. I never attacked Julie. I never mentioned her name. I never linked to her. I didn't tag her in my Twitter thread. I did nothing of the sort. And in fact, I have not responded to a single counterblow that she has thrown at me in the last several days. Not once. Because as I said before, I don't want and I'm not looking for a public pissing match. But I sat on a truth, Kyle, that I knew about for a solid week. I knew that what had been put out there last Tuesday was a half-truth. And the half-truth, as a result of that being allowed to marinate, fester, and grow in the Twitter sphere and the blogosphere and the podcastosphere and all of this, and then it works its all the way up to the Fox News, and then you have Congress members saying that FBI planned an assassination attempt, that they were planning a hit. You just read the comment. This is how out of control it got. And I'm sitting, I don't know if I was the only other person in America that was holding on to this document, that only half of it had been revealed. But I finally felt compelled to release it all. And look, part of the method is accountability. And I am accountable to somebody right now. I am accountable. I have 3 layers of editors I have to go through. And then if it's a really important story, like, for instance, our work on David Lazarus and Officer Harry Dunn.
Yep. When
we bring a story like that to the public, now we're going through a 4th layer, and that's our legal department. Because, you don't call a federal officer a perjurer and accuse him of committing perjury in court and in front of Congress without it going through multiple layers of accountability and review. And apparently, when this was released last Tuesday, and it was only released, as I said, as a half-truth, there was no accountability there. There evidently were no layers of review. Or maybe this was what whoever was involved on that side of the story wanted. They wanted this reaction from the public and from the punditry and from the politicos. Maybe this is exactly what they wanted, was this over reaction, this hyperbolic assassination attempt, bloodbath, etc. FBI hit on the former president kind of rhetoric that we saw out there for several days. And so I couldn't take it anymore, Kyle. I had the document, and I took the document to my editors. And man, look, we don't want these public fights, and it's not It is not healthy for any of us to be taking friendly fire right now. We need to be united. I agree with all of that. But we have to be united in the truth.
Principles.
Following the truth.
Yeah, I libertarians are dealing with this right now too, and I know that you historically have kind of associated, maybe not with the party, but with the ideals of libertarianism, and they're dealing with a real problem as well. They've got an issue of party over principles. The principles that they have are not represented by the people that they just nominated for their ticket. So you've got this like armed and gay guy in Atlanta who is going to now represent the libertarian ticket, which has decided to go 100% clown show, because that's what it is. Right. There's nothing libertarian about trying to, spread the freedom of drag queen story hour. There has to actually still be some fundamental freedoms, and that means you don't get to go after the kids. The libertarians are acting like clowns, and so you have two choices. You can go to party all the time, or you can go to principle. Principle is closer to what truth is. So if you want to be united in truth, I'm on your team, but it's not because we have a team, it's because we have a united goal. The goal is truth. I want to show the document that you're referencing. This is the actual FD 888. So for everyone to understand what happened and why this is so critical, the filings that Julie Kelly was pushing out and why she's gone after and impugn the honor of guys like me and Steve Friend and Garrett O'Boyle and Bill Shipley, people that really have a lot of skin in the game. Bill Shipley is representing J6 defendants for free. Steve's gone to prison, or is facing prison time over this, but has gone to jail and been held up by the marshals. I lost my home. My family had to be, homeless for 6 months and staying with family and trying to figure out what the hell we were going to do for a living. Lost a career and benefits and all the other stuff. Garrett O'Boyle, homeless. Steve, same story. We lost a lot of things for this. And then the document that was quoted from was a partisan filing on behalf of Donald Trump's legal team, right? She was going with what the motion to quash the evidence out of the search warrant. That's what's really important. It was always going to be a slanted take because it's Trump's lawyers. They're supposed to do that, by the way. That's their job. Their job is to push the judge. That's the audience that was designed for. In the meantime, I've got the overall plan, the summary of the plan up on the screen here. So just real quickly, a couple of little points. DOJ and FBI will contact the former POTUS's retained counsel. And they name the counsel, but it's redacted. Person number 18. So, in other words, they were in contact with Trump's attorneys. Notify him of a search warrant, request collaboration and assistance, and after a reasonable amount of time, they'll execute the search warrant. All this is a bad idea, by the way. Would you agree? Like search warrants at Mar-a-Lago, I've been pointed out multiple times in the chat, I'm mispronouncing it, at Mar-a-Lago, is a terrible, shitty idea. It's dangerous and stupid. But not because it's physically dangerous.
I opened my response when I presented not only the other side of this story, but the complete story. When I did present that on X this week, is I opened it by saying it was indefensible. It was reprehensible. There's nothing right, good, honorable, just, probably even illegal about this raid that took place August the 8th of 2022 at Mar-a-Lago. I opened it with that. I said, please read this carefully. I opened with that statement. I closed with that statement, and then got hit by thousands of Julie's supporters calling me a liar and calling me, saying that I was justifying it, that I was defending the FBI. I sometimes you can't win sometimes. It's just not possible. And I knew that going into it, which is why what I was telling you a moment ago is that I went to my editors first, and we don't want this kind of pissing match. We don't want to be disunified. And I said, okay. And I told them, I said, I'm throwing in the towel. I'm not going to do it, because I was writing a longer story on it. I already had 2,500 words in the can written on this very exhaustive analysis of this story, the raid, the information that Julie put out, my response, the actual document. I had everything. I had 2,500 words written. I had interviewed people. I mean, I had long written statements from other of the suspendables and other people that are, we'll just call them former feds, as Julie is referring to them. and as a result of all of that, I contacted my editors and I said, no, I'm just not going to do it. I'm throwing in the towel on this. I said, but here's the document. Here's what it actually says. And this is what the American public doesn't know. And God bless them, to their credit, they said, go for it. And I said, okay, well, if I'm going to do it, I'm not going to do it in article form. I'm going straight to where it was released the first time. It was released on X, Twitter, whatever you still call it. And that's where it needs to be countered. I'm going to go there first. I said, and then we can turn it over to our news department. And then if I need to, I'll follow it up with an opinion piece. My editor agreed to that strategy, and there we go. And that's why we're at the place that we're in right now today.
There's some comments in our chat right now talking about how the attorneys were shut off and said that they didn't have access to, they weren't allowed to be in the premises to be searched. Of course, that's always the case. Like, folks, you don't understand. Once you execute a plan and the plan equals federal search warrant, everything is off. Like, they take control of the scene. They being the federal government. It happens in state law enforcement too. They will lock down an area. Imagine if you got into a shooting in your car. They will not let you hang out in the car and go and look through stuff. That is now a scene that they are going to control until they're done doing it. This is all standard, which is why the minute you agree to do fill in the blank, and fill in the blank is a bad idea, it's not surprising that all the things that normally happen. And I said it the other day on the show, and I think it's most worth hearing. If we're being truly honest, people should understand that the wildest thing is that there's been this argument that there is a two-tier justice system in this country. And the former president of the United States got treated the same way that PCP dealers and meth addicts get treated, that you got treated the same way as PCP dealers or meth addicts, right? You got put in a cell with a guy who was in there for methamphetamine production or distribution. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep, absolutely correct.
This actually hammers home the point more correctly. And we talk about this military concept, this law enforcement concept is called PT bluff, like put the bottom line up front. The bottom line up front is the DOJ will treat anybody that is not on their preferred candidate list like a piece of garbage, from someone who is doing garbage things all the way up to somebody who is simply being a reporter or a guy who was the former president and is a political problem for the current regime. That's the big story. The fact that they had like a predictable package along with a search warrant should never have been very exciting. But it seems like they're just looking for a reason to go back to this well. The well is infinite, it turns out. And it goes back to the point of the clip that I showed while you were offline. When you go looking for anything, there are many things and you're bound to find them. There are tons of juicy nuggets that are involved in this story. But the fact that the Trump legal team made an argument, to a judge, an audience of one, that's not it to me. Only because I've been on these search warrants. I've been on any number of search warrants, and they treated Donald Trump's residence like every other search warrant. That's the big story. It's insane. It's truly crazy.
Well, of course, obviously they're saying that this is not standard operating procedure because it was a president. Yes, you're right. So let me start over again. Let me put all of this as a preface before I say what I'm going to say. The raid itself was reprehensible, indefensible, probably illegal, should have never happened. Mm-hmm. Everybody get that? Okay. Second, the day before this blew up, I praised Julie Kelly's work publicly. Then she put out a half truth. Kyle, you were exactly right when you say that Trump's defense team's job is to try and win, first of all, in the court of public opinion. All right. I'm doing the same thing in my case. Don't think for a second I don't understand that. I mean, I've been doing that for 2.5 years now. I actually beat back the feds when I was just a solo blogger by myself. And this was in November of 21. I was told by an assistant U.S. attorney that I was going to be charged within the week. They were going to charge me with interstate racketeering because I had licensed my videos. Yeah. I had a 20-year felony charge being leveled against me by the Department of Justice. And we went, myself and my attorney, we went into massive media offensive, and I started doing interviews. I was booked on the TV shows, podcasts, radio programs, print interviews, magazine interviews, and I think they got spooked because nobody up to that point, the hundreds of people that I think at that point in the year, we may have been up to around 800 people had been arrested for January 6th offenses at that point, mostly obviously nonviolent misdemeanors. And I think that because nobody had taken that tactic before, it spooked them. They backed off. We didn't hear from them for another 20 months until I got a grand jury subpoena in August of last year. And then by then, I'm now working with the Blaze. And so when they told me again in December, another call from the FBI this time, your client's got to turn himself in next week. That would client being me. We went into media offensive again. This time I had the bullhorn of the Blaze behind me, and they backed off again and said, okay, well, all right, so not next week. We'll do it sometime next year. And they had to retrench. They had to go back to the Star Chamber, sit down at the table, consult with everybody and say, is this the PR hit we want to take? What do we do now? How do we handle this? And they just decided to go forward, hit me with the 4 basic misdemeanors, humiliate me on camera, put me in leg chains, march me before a magistrate. And we are, and I announced, I told them, I have told the Department of Justice, I have told the FBI, I have told the court now, and we are going to try this, my case, in the court of public opinion before we ever get to trial, if it ever goes that far. All right.
The key there is that we acknowledge that that's a useful tactic. I've used it. You've used it. Everybody who understands that there is power in the media and public sentiment knows that you have to push certain things if you want to survive against something like the federal government, which is the biggest monster in the room. It's the 800-pound gorilla, and you're just like one chimp. So it's a big animal to push against, and you use every tool you get, which you've just accurately described your situation. I think that's useful. Carry on.
So when you look at this situation from, not only our experience, but the fact that it's my experience, and you know what the Trump legal team is doing. And by the way, without getting into too much detail, I'm actively involved with the Trump legal team for their DC case. I've been actively consulted for months now. I have spent, I don't even know, dozens upon dozens of hours in direct consultation with them on developing that case. And why are they consulting with me, little old me? It's because I have experience in the arena that they are brand new in.
I get let me just share this too. I get phone calls from former FBI agents who have been hired on as investigators for various different organizations. I don't need to name them for credibility. I'll just tell you that they're public and they're national, and some of them are involved in high-profile cases like you just talked about. Investigators reach out to me and Steve and Garrett, Steve Friend, and they reach out to you because we have specific visibility, knowledge at a specific amount of time, and we are the only people willing to talk about it. We're the only people willing to give insight and give connections and share with them names that they would never know, because those guys retired from the Bureau before any of this nonsense happened. And we got thrown out on our heads. The FBI is a tight group. DOJ is a tight group. They all circle wagons and protect the brand and the name. You and me and the other suspendables are willing to throw bombs into that camp. And so we're a valuable resource to those people. That makes us not a Fed op. That makes us whatever the opposite of that is. We are a Fed threat. And we continue to be a Fed threat, which is why you ended up with a freaking belly chain on standing in front of a judge in Dallas.
That's right. But this is, and going back to the preface, again, the raid was reprehensible.
Yep.
It was indefensible. It was probably illegal. You notice I've said this 3 or 4 times now because I have to say it every time, because if I don't, then somebody's going to take one of my follow-up statements, they're going to post it on Twitter, and they're going to say that I am a pro-Biden, anti-MAGA, operative. And as I've been accused of several times in the last few days. All because I didn't contradict Julie's work. I showed the rest of it that she had access to. And one thing, I did make a technical error the other day in response to somebody, because I haven't responded to Julie at all, but I made a technical error. And I said that she posted edited screenshots. Well, oh no. I mean, she did. She responded to that and called me a liar. She hasn't edited anything. And I said, I should have said cropped photos. I said edited photos. So I you know, when I come from, you know, music and studio background and that sort of thing. So when we're, you know, editing files, be they video files or whatever, and you clip, you know, the front part off, whatever, we will call it an edit. We will call it a crop. We will call it, you know, whatever. It was just a terminology. And so people were saying that she needs to sue me for that claim. I said, fine. I can show you thousands and thousands and thousands of examples in the marketplace where that phraseology has been used as well. The bottom line is she had full page documents of a 16, 20, 25 page document, whatever it ended up being. And she took and screenshotted, cropped out that which would support the narrative of who? The defense team.
Which needed to be done because that's their job, which is fine. We just have to be honest about what it is and what it isn't. That's not God's objective truth. That is a partisan argument. We have an adversarial system. One side says this is the worst person ever and he should never be allowed to speak and he should be put in jail with no bond. And the other side says, dude, this is a former president. What the hell is wrong with you people? Like there was an assassination attempt by the federal government. They're arguing and they're trying to get to the middle of it where the judge is supposed to be the arbiter who goes, nah, I don't think there was an assassination attempt, but also give me a break. He's not going to run anywhere. He publishes his schedule for everybody. Let's just take a breath. That's the job of the judge. They're supposed to be a referee between two warring adversarial clans. This is the uncropped picture, by the way, folks. If you want to see what it looks like, this is like every FD 888 that I've ever seen. This is what it looks like. This is the document that was created after Ruby Ridge because the FBI killed two people. They ruled it justifiable. It was a terrible instance. It was the biggest black eye on the FBI that I remember as a kid. And the more I learned about it, I went like, oh my God, Waco, the search warrant there was probably illegal. It was definitely terrible what they did at the Branch Covidian compound. That was one of the worst things that's ever happened in my lifetime. And Mar-a-Lago is very, very similar in that it shows a repeat and a move back to that 90s jackbooted thug mentality that the government gets to do might equals right. And the only way you push against
I've had several people over the last few days who have pointed out some of those exact scenarios where, you know, federal agents' raids gone bad, Waco, Ruby Ridge, et cetera, other individuals who have been apparently assassinated by the FBI in their homes. So they have throw flashbangs into a guy, you know, in Tennessee with a, you know, sketchy background to see if he'll respond. We still don't know if he did or not because the FBI won't release any documents or talk about it, but they shot him. They killed him. Mm-hmm. And so there's the people are rolling these examples out at me, you know, en masse for the last few days. But there's a significant difference between all of those, even if we're talking about the worst of the worst being, you know, Waco with 80 something dead, including, you know, dozens of children. The worst of the worst example, none of those were blue on blue conflicts. So that's what I want to talk to you about right now. And I want your perspective on, and what I want to hear about is because what's making me absolutely insane is this idea that, as I said before, that there was going to be a shootout at the Mar-a-Lago Corral between the FBI and because look, if the FBI, according to MTG and according to Gosser, if they went in specifically to take out the former president or to assassinate him, that meant that they were going to be going into open conflict, warfare, shootout with Secret Service agents. Now, I don't know about you, Kyle, and I don't know which you consider to be the best trained, because it's probably different. I don't know that either agency is better trained than the others, but there's certainly specialists in each of those groups that are, you know, very highly trained. Probably some are less so. But the point being is the last group of people that I want to go get. I don't want to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, kiss my wife, goodbye, pat my children on the heads before they, trundle off to grade school, knowing that as an FBI agent, I'm going up against the Secret Service at 9 o'clock this morning.
No, that's what
That's
what they do. They're security specialists, right? Like personal protection, they're the gold standard. I don't want to do that. That might be why they sent HRT, but I would argue the reason they did it is because they were doing optics. They were doing the same thing as putting you in a belly chain. Was it because there's a real possibility that your hands were going to come up with your handcuffs and you were going to go grab somebody in the courtroom? No, they wanted to show we are the boss here. We're in charge. We're screwing with you. Do something about it. You can't. We're going to send our tier 1 tactical team to come here because we're the boss. The process is the punishment. And how dare you upset this narrative? That's more likely to me is that it was about optics, that they thought it was going to be a good optic, or they thought, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. The other possibility, equally stupid, by the way, is that we're going to send our best guys in so that we have the best muzzle discipline and trigger discipline. The safest way to do this is send the best trained people we have. Even if that's the case, how dumb. And the whole argument that I've seen online that people are crying about, like they were coming in plain clothes, there's no FBI uniform. What I'm wearing right now, the Kyle Seraphin Show shirt, this is a perfectly good shirt to show up for an FBI search warrant. You know why? Because there's no uniform. They don't issue one. It doesn't get assigned. There's no such thing as an FBI uniform. There never has been. They don't have one. It used to be suits. And in some cases, I've served search warrants in suits. That's a thing. I've showed up in a suit. It's rare. Mostly people come in with this tactical attitude. They generally wear, like almost all the feds, you have a bunch of people wearing khakis and people wearing, some various polo shirts. But I almost always went in with an operational medicine shirt because I was a paramedic. On the back of it, it said team medic. That's what it said. Because I was the team's medic should something happen. So, I had that. I had dive team paramedic on one of my shirts that I would wear sometimes. I had multiple different medical shirts. That's the closest to a uniform. And what it was is some dude in my field office got it printed at like Custom Ink or whatever, shirt company they use. This is not a real thing. The idea that there was going to be a blue on blue conflict, it's sort of dispelled by the fact that we see these documents that say they're going to call the attorney. They're going to interface with Secret Service. They have this thing, filter team, right? The that's Miami. That's the code for the Miami field office. MAL, U.S. Secret Service representatives will be interfaced with, and they will be talking to the case team. The execution will require the coordination, not the opposition, but the coordination with U.S. Secret Service, and may include coordinated searches with Mar-a-Lago guest services to ensure a fulsome understanding of the spaces that are going to be occupied. The key is on a search warrant, folks, there's only certain spaces you can go into, and it has to be something that is reasonably expected for the person involved to have access to. So if it's a guest quarters that Donald Trump could never get into, they shouldn't be searching those spaces. That's what they were trying to ascertain. All of this stuff is terrible. It's all the dumbest thing in the world, but it is what happens when you execute, like all the things that come from executing the plan equals, search warrant equals all this dumb stuff. It equals deadly force policy. It equals coordination. It equals a description of the places. It equals an affidavit saying, and the real crazy is that a judge signed off on it, a guy named Bruce Reinhart, who I have not seen in the news in the last year and a half or 2 years.
Yeah, and obviously that's a key component because, again, a judge signed off on it and shouldn't have, but as soon as he does, it trips, the trigger of all of these processes that have to be followed and people, if I say it, they're going to jump on me. I'm going to say it. SOP, standard operating procedure, and they're going to jump online right now and in the comments, this is not a standard operator. It's never been done before. A former president of the United States has never been had his home raided before. Yes, you're right.
Correct.
Yes, and it's reprehensible, it's indefensible, and it's probably illegal. I said it again. And I'm going to continue to say it, and, I have to lead with it, and I have to close with that, that statement every single time. Yes, a raid on a former president is unprecedented. But once the judge signs the warrant, then certain things happen. And the dominoes begin to fall.
Yeah,
and one of those dominoes is the filling out of the FD 888. Do you have a screenshot of the 302? Do you have that one?
I don't, but I'm sure I can grab it because I have your thread up here. The thing that blows my mind in some ways too is that all the tactical teams and all the arrest teams, that everybody agree. Look, I said this in my first interview with Dan Bongino, but the question is, who agreed to this stuff? Who said that this was going to be okay? Who said, you know what, I'm good with doing the thing that you've just asked of me. I'm not going to do, because there are other examples, and specifically Steve Friend is one of them. My buddy Steve got up and said, you want me to do a SWAT hit on a guy that said he would turn himself in whenever you want? I don't get it. I'm not doing that. I think I just pulled the 302 up right here. Document is restricted to case participants, which means it was a restricted document to only those who work directly on the case. That's going to be a very small number of people out of Washington Field. Not everybody could read it. It tells you that there's a search warrant. It tells you the name of the serial where that was sitting. It was issued in the in district court in the Southern District of Florida on August the 5th. So they basically had between August the 5th and August the 8th to plan all this stuff, which is what all the documents seem to show. And you're looking at that little square right there that says prior, right? Prior to the FBI's entry team.
And here's, before you read it, I can actually see you online right now, amazingly. So I know what you have up now. But the point being is that not only do we know beyond any doubt that there was prior planning, we knew and we know now that Secret Service had been notified by the FBI. And I don't know, look, I don't know what the nature of the conversation was, but you know better than I do, or certainly would have much better insight. Somebody from, I don't know if it was a special agent in charge or somebody higher up. Somebody had to contact the supervisor at Secret Service at Mar-a-Lago and go, "Hey, man, I got a shitty thing I got to do."
That's exactly what that conversation had to sound like, right? Unless they were just insane.
Exactly what it was.
Unless they were totally insane. And I don't believe that there's enough insane people. It would have had to gone something like this. You're exactly right. You're not going to effing believe this. But I've got a search warrant for the area that you guys protect. We've got to do some coordination here. This is going to be really dumb. How do we make this work out? Who's your, the POC you guys want to nominate for things going forward? And let's set up a deconfliction chain. Here's something a lot of people don't know. We have a thing called Blue Force trackers. Do you know what those are, Steve?
No.
Blue Force trackers is a military technology. It is a GPS coordinate or a GPS device that will illuminate any number of people, specific to down to an individual or even just a team movement or a vehicle. And we would have Blue Force tracking technology. The program is actually called ATAC. It comes on the Android program, but it's a tactical awareness kit. And you can activate it, and it was required activation, guess what, for all SWAT operations. Every single, at least vehicle unit, and every team leader had to have an activation of this Blue Force tracking program that shows you up on a GPS position on a global map. And we have tiers, we have ways to open up what they call sockets to U.S. Secret Service and to DEA and even to DOD assets if we're working overseas. So we can show our physical, real-world, up-to-the-date position in real time with other federal assets and other federal departments, and including up to, like I said, DOD and other assets overseas. If we accidentally opened up the stuff for like big events, we'd sometimes see people that had their channel open that would be like in really weird places in the Middle East and stuff like that, right? Like we would see things, we're like, oh, there's like a DOD guy like that's doing something shady with DEA that's like in, outside the border of Iran, or he's in Syria. Like what the hell is that? So you'd see all this kind of stuff. So we have the ability to do deconfliction, and the reason why is because I've worked with, some people are calling it like it's IFF. It's identify friend foe is the way the military often terms it. And so you would have different colors that would be different schemes, and you have deconfliction that happens on these major national events. By the way, that's what should have happened on January 6th. Just you and me talking here. That should have been activated under this protocol that's known as the NSSE. And when you're doing NSSEs, which means National Special Security Events, and you're doing so in places like Washington, D.C. for a big national event, and all the guys are out there, so ATF and DOE, the Department of Energy, is out doing their thing, we all activate this Blue Force tracking program, and we all show where we are in real time, so that if people are looking at it, they can say, listen, FBI, unit number 7, whatever it is, Hurricane Team 3, you are in close proximity to interview team 5. Make contact if need be, or whatever it is, if you're looking for them. They would actually do link ups that way. And Secret Service has their own channels, and we had our own channels, and we could easily cross those streams and mitigate the potential for blue on blue. Like there's a lot of different tools that are out there, and I don't know how long they've been there, but they've been there for a long time. These are open source tools, by the way. I'm not giving away secrets here, folks. You can go down ATAC right now if you have an Android. You can go get ATAC. It's ATAK. That's how you get it. So this stuff exists, and it was always out there, and it was very important because and Secret Service does something that's kind of cool. They put a specific type of tape on there, and it changes, but they put a tape on the muzzle of their weapon. So if they identify that a muzzle is pointed out in the world and you don't see the person that's holding it and they're in plain clothes, but they have the right tape, then that's a friend. So it's another fail safe. So you can see it. It's like, okay, how do you identify that that's a good guy gun versus a bad guy gun? You put tape, reflective tape on it, so that when it pops up, the only thing you see before that muzzle is actually the appropriate type of tape. They do this in competitive handgun competitions all the time too. So if anybody's ever seen that, it's reflective tape. It has a specific pattern for the day, and that equals a cleared weapon. In any case, there's a lot of different tools. Blue on blue, I don't think was ever really a real thing. And this is why we're showing this document here, which we alluded. You want me to read it real quick?
Yeah. Go through the red square there.
Okay, red square here. This is the FBI's 302. This is going to be the operational 302, which is the document of record that shows what was going on. And it says, prior to the FBI's team entry onto the MAL premises, the FBI leadership informed and coordinated with local U.S. Secret Service leadership. Local U.S. Secret Service facilitated entry onto the premises. I'm going to read that again. Local Secret Service facilitated entry onto the premises, provided escort and access to various locations within, and posted U.S. Secret Service personnel in locations where the FBI team conducted searches. Are we pretty clear on what that says? You want to give it another whirl?
Look, I don't even know. Okay, I'm catching my breath, but more importantly, I'm biting my tongue. Again, with that pause, I will now say there is only one reason why Julie Kelly withheld that page from her explosive reveal last Tuesday is because that paragraph that you just read took down the entire artificially induced rage that swept through right-wing punditry last week. That paragraph takes it down. And that's why it was withheld.
That's not a good sensation. That's not a good feeling, really, to think about that. I would, people have been recommending in the chat, hey, bring Julie Kelly on so she can talk about it herself. Like, I'm happy to. The problem with Julie Kelly is I reached out to her and I told her what I thought. And she basically told me, piss off. And she did the same thing to Bill Shipley, and she did the same thing to Steve Friend. It's not that we care how many clicks she gets. Do you care about how many clicks Julie Kelly gets? Does that affect you at all? Is this a zero-sum game?
It doesn't affect my life in the least. I think that her initial tweet on this had over 10 million views. You know what the impact on me was for that? None. Zero.
Yeah, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
The problem is that we only are interested in saying the things that are true, which goes back to the point of the method. If you're emotionally interested in the outcome of anything in investigation, then you are going to come up with tainted takes at the very least. That's the nicest way of saying that. But you're compromised because you've compromised yourself, which is why Sherlock Holmes is the greatest detective of all time. Because he's a weirdo. Because he doesn't care what people think about him. And that is exactly what you started off by saying. If you don't give a shit, if you only care about the things that are accurate, then you can do things that nobody else is willing to do.
And what was the first thing that I ever told you, probably the first time that you ever had me on your podcast? I said to you that with regards to my January 6th investigations, I'm talking about the big picture. I'm not talking about the individual investigations about events or circumstances or individual characters that I investigated. But I have an ongoing review and investigation to the much larger picture. And I said to you, and I've said it to dozens of other people in other interviews, I don't care where this leads. I don't care if this ultimately takes me to Pelosi's desk. I don't care if it takes me to General Milley's desk. I don't care if it takes me to Donald Trump's desk. I don't care.
Do you know what I think is the weirdest part of all of it? This is my ongoing, we haven't bounced this idea yet, but I think that there's something very strange, and it goes back to my continued concern that January 6th wasn't called an NSSE. The only people that can declare NSSE is the U.S. Secret Service. Did you know that?
How about that? I did not know that, but...
Put that into your calculus as you continue to look at things. The people that decide, because you don't need the National Guard to secure Washington, D.C. They don't need it. They never have. Right. It's never been required. Washington, D.C. gets overwhelming, both protests. They get overwhelming amounts of people that come in either for scheduled or non-scheduled protests. They invade the National Mall on a regular basis. This stuff goes on. And you declare this. There are some that are always declared. And the ones that are always declared are like State of the Union. That's an annual thing. Every single presidential inauguration is. All the 4th of July parades are. And other big kind of events that happen where there's going to be just a ton of people. They bring out the entire cavalry. There's 2 reasons why, just so you know. NSSE, a national special security event. It is defined by statute and law. You guys can go out there and look it up yourself. You can look up NSSE, and what you'll find is that the United States Secret Service under DHS is the only group that can declare it, and they are the point contact for all coordination in D.C. I don't know why, honestly. I don't know why Secret Service is the one, maybe because most of them have to do with the president and a big protectee. But even so, the fact is that Secret Service and the director of the Secret Service, who I don't know the name of the Secret Service director on January 6th, and I don't know what was going on there. Was there an interim? Were they already transitioning out? Who made the call that this wasn't going to be an NSSE, and why has that not been adjudicated over and over again? It's the only thing that I've always honed in on as this is abnormal. And it was abnormal. I should not have been able to take leave on the day that I did. I already had a contingency set up for whatever it's worth. I set up a contingency saying, because I'd paid for some training to go and do some firearms training on that day. And I was like, if I can't come in, can I meet you guys for a different class? And they said, yeah, absolutely. And I said, okay, great, because I may get called into work because in theory, there's going to be a big protest. And if there's a big protest in DC, my surveillance team would be on standby. We would go sit over at the National Park Service, Park Police headquarters. It's called the Eagle's Nest. It's where their helicopter lives. We would all hang out there in our cars and do nothing and be ready for tasking. And then they would see us on the Blue Force tracker and they would say, okay, whatever, SOG blue, SOG red, SOG green, we need you to go and step in and follow this individual. Look for this dot on the screen, follow it to that thing. They're going to give you eyes on and point you to somebody, and you're going to start following them, either on foot or vehicle. And that's what we would do. And we did that a lot for people that did weird stuff. And like, we're talking about weird stuff. Like people would come in to an event with like multiple backpacks, and then they would like leave one somewhere and be like full of tissues or something. Like just weird shit where you go, that's not normal. So we would follow them just to make sure that they weren't doing something that would invade people's ability to, exercise their First Amendment. I don't know why Secret Service didn't declare it on that day, but I would love to know more. And I don't have the ability to really do a research on that. Like it's not research. This is a governmental investigation. That's what I've asked weaponization to look into.
Yeah. Well, and if we don't get the full support from Congress on these investigations, none of us are ever going to get to the bottom of it because, as you said, unless I had Sherlock Holmes' ability or I had the superpower of the Invisible Man, I'm not going to be able to get behind the closed doors where these documents and this digital information exist to be able to pull it up. And ultimately, if Congress does not help us, we're not going to solve this case. We can get really close. We can develop very powerful and believable theories.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, with in line with what you're saying, and we may have touched on this to some extent in the past, but it's worth reiterating for whoever's listening today, is that we now know beyond any, doubt that, first of all, the DOD wanted to have canceled every First Amendment protest permit that day. They wanted them all canceled. And it wasn't just the 6 permits at the Capitol itself that had been issued by the Capitol Police. There were 82 First Amendment protest permits issued on January 6th. across all the agencies, Park Police, MPD, USCP, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they DOD wanted to cancel all of them.
Yeah, and what's weird is most of the time these protests just happen. Like if you're on the political left, you don't need a permit. You just show up and shut down streets, and everybody just goes, guess I'll just accommodate it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you're on the right and you do it the correct way, they wanted to cancel it.
Yeah, yeah. And so then we also now know that every single tactical unit of every three-letter agency was pre-positioned there. It was not until after the breach of the Capitol that they started showing up. I was the first one to capture ATF tactical units on my camera within 3 or 4 minutes after Ashley Babbitt was shot. Then all of a sudden, they popped up out of nowhere. ATF did not get there in 3 minutes, Kyle, from across town.
And ATF is not the people that should respond.
No. Point being is,
I know that the mutual aid SWAT teams for all the surrounding counties, many of them were training with me on January 6, 2021. Many of their members were training with me. They were not on a standby status. They were hanging out. And those are the first people that you would normally go to. You would go to FBI SWAT, which is based out of Washington Field, but they're not always at Washington Field. But you can grab enough guys to run down to the team room and have a team response. The office I used to work out of in 2021 has something like 50 or 60 guys on the SWAT team. And there's always going to be a dozen or 2 dozen of them hanging out in the office. Most of them work counterterrorism or counterintelligence. They're sitting in a skiff and they can run down, they can change out for their team room locker. Or, they don't have a team room locker, but they have a team room that has all kinds of uniform stuff. Even if they didn't have their stuff, but they all have it in their vehicles. They can run, change out, get a quick briefing, mount up and drive over, which is what they did. Those people. But that takes you 45 minutes, maybe 30 minutes if you're really, really smoking and they get a really good heads up and they manage to put an all call out. I wasn't in the office on the day, so I can't say if there was an all call on the PA. But you could get a response, but you can't get a 3-minute response out of them. So ATF was on standby.
And I'll also tell and I'll also tell you, the only place I've ever seen this on video was actually on Russian TV. You can see FBI SWAT leading Congress members downstairs into the tunnels. This was before Ashley Babbitt was shot.
How did you tell that they were FBI SWAT?
Big old yellow FBI across their breastplates.
Got it. Was it they were wearing the yellow ones, or were they wearing the black with the multicams?
No, this was not black. These were camo, and they were very, very much identified and emblazoned as FBI, and they were leading them down the stairs into the tunnels.
It's not hard. Like I said, it wouldn't be hard to grab 2 dozen of those people, even if they weren't on the actual response team. I know guys that went in that responded to the Capitol on that day, and I also heard them talking about it, and they were really proud of themselves. They were talking about how they could have shot somebody, and they shoved some guy to the ground, and like he was a real dick, and all this other kind. Like I listened to the team room chat for the week afterwards because I sat on a bag as a medic in the team room. So these people are not people. This is not like some group of people I don't know.
Why didn't all of these guys with, carrying M4s assist Capitol Police and Metro PD in preventing access to the doors of the Capitol? I want to know that.
That's the whole piece about what the briefing. The problem is this, and my friend heard this on the day of. The senior management for the FBI set up an immediate command post, like you would for an emergency. And they were overheard in the hallway saying, this is going to be our 9/11. Not that it was the biggest terrorist attack, but it was a way to ride one case to the top of the FBI for management from here on out. They knew it on January 6th. That doesn't mean they planned it, people, but they saw an opportunity, and the senior management, including people like Jennifer Moore, who we've talked about on this podcast many times, and who is an actual liar, documented liar, someone who has lied under oath to Congress, and I can prove that. That's not even negotiable. I've shared this with a number of members of Congress, and nobody seems to care, so I guess they don't care about testimony. But she has actually lied, and she was one of the people that was involved in that. And she was the special agent in charge of quote unquote intelligence, which also was the supervisory level that my team fell under. It was the intelligence division of the FBI, Washington field office. So they knew there was an opportunity there.
I can put this one. Yeah, I can put this story down in the same way we put down the disinformation campaign that came out of the Trump team last week. I said it again. The point being is that there's absolutely no way that 300 or 400 people, because that's all it was, overran with sticks, bear spray, flagpoles, 2 fully armed police departments, all of the tactical units from every 3-letter agency, and now we know CIA was on the ground, had boots on the ground. Now we know that the Department of Defense assets had boots on the ground. None of this is going to happen and by the way, when I say 300 or 400, I'm being very generous. The actual numbers actually continued to be spoken by the Department of Justice, DOJ, is that they estimate only about 225 people actually participated in violence. Now, there's going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 plus charged with violent acts, but that's going to be more of obstructing police. That's going to be more of aiding and abetting. That's going to be more of being in the area. Or a guy, a guy that had the big banner that was passed, the metal, guys that reached up and touched that as it was coming over their head. A response that anybody would make, including Ray Epps, made that response and put his hand up on it. Everybody but Ray that did that, they've been charged with a felony for using a deadly weapon against law enforcement. And so, point being is a lot of people who just made the natural response of, there's a big, long piece of metal above my head. I'm going to put my hand up to keep it from hitting me in the head.
Sure.
They got charged with a violent felony.
Right.
So, by the DOJ's own estimate, only about 225 people actually engaged in violence against this law enforcement. And yet they managed to collapse the police line, a reinforced police line by MPD. And then also with all of these clandestine, surreptitiously located somewhere tactical units that suddenly appeared out of nowhere. They were there, Kyle.
Yeah, that's wild. And it's also wild that my ongoing and working theory continues to be somebody at Secret Service failed this, Homeland Security, something in that somewhere in that chain of command, it fell flat, and I don't know why, and I don't have the ability to discern, and neither do you, and hopefully Congress is getting on that team to figure it out. The second thing is that all of the things that happened on January 6th led to that raid that happened at Mar-a-Lago. It had to be that we set it up, and you can see it because the original charges with that 1512 obstruction, there's a reason why Trump was charged with it as well. They were playing with a game that needed to be worked out at lower levels. You always take on small game before you take on larger game. You don't start your first hunt on a moose or an elk. You go and you shoot rabbits, or you shoot squirrels, or you shoot deer, something that's easier. So it seems obvious to me that these are all related, and I think that's the bigger story, is that all of this has to be said. It's a bigger picture, and the big picture is it's not simply about Donald Trump and what happened at his house. It's what's happened at hundreds and now up to over 1,000 houses in this country, where we are proving over and over again that we have a DOJ that is weaponized against at least some members of the American people. And by the way, they used to be weaponized against people that we thought it was kind of okay. We, being the conservative right, was sort of okay with the war on terror. They were sort of okay with the Patriot Act. They were like, oh yeah, that's obviously what we need to do. We need to get really aggressive. We need to be monitoring these mosques. Religious freedom is either free or it's not in this country. And so that's the biggest piece about principles. It's not fun to make an argument that people who have a fundamentally different view of the world have a right to that view. But that's what America's about. That's why I enlisted. That's why you go and you pursue truth. It's very hard to square that in your brain. That's why you have to have room for agree to disagree, and you have to operate in honesty. That's the team that I'm on. Like I said, team outcome and team truth for its own sake, even if it's inconvenient.
It's an interesting point because not only do we have to be able to disagree, we are taking long knives to each other over 1% disagreement sometimes, Kyle, 5%. One of the first things that I do before I meet with a Congress member is I go look at their voting record.
Mm-hmm.
You know why I do that? I want to know how much of an agreement I actually am with this guy or this gal.
Sure.
Is it 85? Is it 85%? Okay, that's pretty good. Is it 97%? Like a Thomas Massey or a Rand Paul? Okay.
Right.
Yeah, we're going to get along. We're going to get along very well. Now,
and when they disagree, you can look at their disagreements in good faith. You're like, okay, well, this is a person that I almost always agree with. So it's more quirky and interesting that we don't agree on something. I've got a buddy that I agree with probably, like you said, 95, 97% of the time. That 5 or 3% when we don't, it's very weird to find those edges. And you're like, oh, tell me more. If you're honest, you say, tell me more about that. You don't go, screw you, we're never going to be friends. I've never heard of people say every friend of mine has to agree with me 100%. You should only be friends with yourself then. That's the only person. It's a subset of one that you will agree with all the time.
Yeah. And that's why when we think that Thomas Massey is going off the rails, what is the one thing that he will do? He goes into detailed explanation, helping you understand. Now, he's an MIT trained, master's degree engineer. He's one of those guys probably on the spectrum. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But the point being is that when he knows that he's about to go off the plantation or off the approved narrative from even his own team, he goes into a detailed explanation so you can understand his thought process and how he came to that conclusion. You may still disagree with him, but you know he reasoned it out.
If you are asking yourself, God, Kyle, why are you guys still flogging this horse? It's over. The reason is exactly what you just said. Because we are giving you all of the reasons why we don't agree with something that's very important. And also, I haven't rejected Julie Kelly. Her phone number is not blocked. I don't think she's saying good things. I don't like people slandering me in public. I don't like them, pushing false information and claiming that I'm an op. That's nonsensical. It's offensive to my family members. I watched my wife cry over this far too many times to have some lady who has never endured physical hardship for this country or emotional or, as far as I know, financial hardship because of the love of truth. Maybe she has, but she hasn't told me about it. I don't want that. But it doesn't mean that I'm not going to still support those people. It doesn't mean that I don't agree with them most of the time. Almost all the time I do. I don't even think there's a lot of daylight between our opinions. It's simply about motivation. And we're allowed to have those disagreements in America. That's why we're on Rumble. Folks, you want to know, we're on Rumble because we can have dissenting opinions. We don't get censored like we do over on YouTube. Or if I tell you, hey, guess what? There's some real nasty fear porn. By the way, Steve, I did a whole episode on fear porn and what's being pushed and how to trigger the amygdala with this bird flu N5H1 thing.
Yeah.
Immediately dropped off YouTube for vaccine misinformation. Reading directly from the AP. So, that's how that goes. God forbid you quote any of the sources that they don't choose. And if you say anything from Dr. Peter McCullough, like, you're done. So that episode, it wasn't a strike, by the way. We're not we're just removing it because it's dangerous for people to have more information. End of the day, the reason this thing has been beaten so many times is because a lot of us have, I'm going to suggest, thousands of hours. Like, I'm not an expert on FISA, but I know more about FISA than almost everybody that's talking about it. Because I have about 4,000 hours worth of functional work on the FISA systems that the FBI did. That's not a ton, by the way, 4,000. But it's more than most people who talk about it. It's more than Sean Hannity's ever had. It's more than almost every congressperson has ever had. I have more experience in that space. I've got thousands of briefings to the point where I can tell you the DOJ's deadly force policy from memory as I briefed it to my team every day for hundreds of days in a row. And you just quote, check your notes here, but it just says law enforcement officers of the Department of Justice may use deadly force only when necessary. Again, another key piece of it. That is when the officer has a reasonable belief that the subject of such force poses an imminent danger of death or serious physical injury to the officer or another person. It's in my head because I used to say it daily, and it doesn't mean anything. It just means that if you have to do it, they have to meet all the criteria, and we've just told you what it is. It's classic CYA. We have to understand these things. That's not an authorization to go use it. It's always in effect. Anyway, we'll We'll conclude our thoughts with the method about, and I said this while you were off the line, and I think this is the most important. There's two pieces to it: the objectivity, the observation; those are critical, and empathy is the last one. Do you want to talk a little bit about the need for empathy when you're reviewing information? You talked about it the first time you and I spoke about your dad's techniques and what he does sitting in a room. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, my dad was one of those guys who had the quote unquote profiler gift. I didn't know that at the time. Looking back at his career and his life, I realized that he had that. He was one of those guys. We've seen them played on TV and in the movies. They seem to have the ability to get into the head of the person that they're looking for or the person they're investigating, and come up with not only motives but sometimes just location. And my dad's specialty was missing persons. And he had been able to find over his career, I don't know how many individuals, I'm not even going to throw a number out, that had been, I'm not going to say cold cased by the FBI or had been, whatever you guys call it when you put it at the bottom of your file. But the bottom line is they had quit looking for them and were, for whatever reason, no longer a priority. And my dad, as a private investigator, would either be hired by family members or other interested parties to find these individuals, and he would lock himself in his office, and he might come out 3 hours or 3 days later. But when he came out, now this is pre-internet, there was no Google, there was no Wikipedia, there was none of this. But when he came out of his office, he knew where they were, probably already had them on the phone, the actual individual that the FBI had given up on. And he could by just interviewing the family members or interviewing the interested parties, picking up additional leads, clues, other people he might need to talk to, and he would just get on the phone and he would start talking to these individuals. And as all of this thing would start, coalescing in his mind, he could put himself into that person's place, into their own mindset. He could basically become them and go, okay, if I'm them, where would I be?
That's empathy. That's what empathy looks like, folks. If you don't know the difference between sympathy and empathy, it's very critical, and it's one of the things that makes you a better investigator. It is a gift, but it's also a practice. So in order to do it, what you have to do, sympathy means I see that you are feeling bad, and I feel bad that you're feeling bad. But empathy is I see that you're feeling bad, and I feel bad as you feel bad. I am able to actually channel the thing that you are feeling internally. And occasionally, you've got to be able to do that. You have to put yourself in somebody else's shoes and say, what are the motives? What are the reasons? What are the driving factors here at play? Not from me looking on the outside with my biases that I'm trying to eliminate, but what is going on from the other side? And that's actually understanding that the audience, that maybe even an audience of one, the audience is, it's like, okay, the audience is what's going on in somebody else's head. What are their actual motives and intent? We can always only estimate them. Some people have that rare gift to be able to really feel it. Sounds like your dad was one of those types of guys. It's very cool when people can do it. But that's where the Zero Effect movie falls short. He talks about his momentary lapse in objectivity. And it turns out occasionally you have to be less objective and more subjective by being very empathetic. And it's not subjective giving into your own, it's giving into somebody else's thoughts. It's hard to do it. And then also walk away from it. People, if you feel as other people do, it will affect you. It has a toll on people, and it makes them very difficult to be around. And it also is like, it's really sad. If you feel other people's pain, true empaths, like they're constantly hurting because it's not their pain. They're picking up everybody's pain. And that's tough to see. My wife is very much like that, or she was before she stopped sleeping and had babies. She can't be as empathic anymore. It's the cure. Yeah. It's the cure to true empathy. Yeah.
And let me tell you another thing, an aspect about this method that we have to be aware of, is that it's like any research, and you mentioned the scientific method earlier. You have to be willing to get it wrong sometimes. You have to be willing to put yourself out close enough to the edge that you're going to make a mistake in the interpretation of your observation. I have gotten many things wrong in my observation of January 6th characters or events or instances that I've looked at closely. As a result of that, with more data, more video, more trial discovery, etc., we learn more, and then as we learn, we get better at it. You know,
Yeah.
our programming gets better at it.
If you're being really honest, those are the moments of real discovery when you're like, aha,
that's right.
I was wrong.
That's right.
There's more to it. I've actually cracked my own biases, my own assumptions, and I'm able to go a little bit deeper now. Now it's opened up a whole new, if you were exploring the caverns of truth, it's punching through what looked like a wall, seeing a little hole and looking in and seeing another cavern.
But you have to be willing to do that. And then you have to be willing to go forward and say, okay, I made this mistake. I'll just give you one quick example. It is big, and it's been a while since I've been at the Blaze. I have for, a year and a half, I've been for 3 years now, absolutely 100% convinced that Harry Dunn was never called the N-word by 20, 30, 40, 50 people chanting it at him at a time. The reason why I'm convinced of that is because in the most video recorded event in the history of, humanity, that is not on video, where 1 out of every 3 people that are standing around had a cell phone camera up in the air. And so I know that didn't happen. But the one thing that I had never found, and we did a story, is with all of this thousands upon tens of thousands of hours of video, no one had at that point produced a video of anybody using the N-word. And even though I made that point, I also always qualified this. And I said, now look, there were some people carrying a Confederate flag. It would be highly unlikely that, the tens of thousands of people that gathered at the Capitol, the 3,000 people that went inside the Capitol, the hundreds of thousands of people that were at, in the city that day for January 6th, it's highly unlikely that there weren't some racial people in there that's a word in their, vocabulary and probably regularly used. It just happens. And I can show you the equal and the opposite on the other side from the leftist protest. Okay? Sure. So it's just the way it is. There's extremists, there's racists, there's prejudice on both sides of the political aisle.
But
and then when I came out with that story, one of the sedition hunters contacted me privately and said, I've got your video for you. I got your N-word video.
Mm-hmm.
And she sent it. And you know what I did with it?
Published it.
I published it.
Exactly. And how many people were saying it?
We got 1, maybe 2 so far that we've found.
So and was it audible to Harry Dunn most likely?
No, none of this had anything to do with Harry Dunn whatsoever.
Of course.
See, it had nothing to do with him.
Right.
And it wasn't in his vicinity when it was used. He wasn't even there. Yes. Thank you. And so the point being is that once it was revealed to me, I even said, I said this. If you have the video, send it to me. I'll write a story about it.
In other words,
sent to me. I wrote a story about it.
I'm willing to be wrong.
That's correct. That's exactly correct.
That's how the game of truth is played, by the way, folks. When there's more information out there, that's why we talk about the illusory truth effect on here. If you hear it over and over again and you want it to be true, those are the things you got to question the most. We're talking about the method, not because it's so interesting for me and Steve to go and chop it up, although I will talk to Steve all day about anything he wants. We have a lot of fun. It's really important that you have a rubric to evaluate information that comes at you.
I got a text this morning from somebody you really don't like. And
what is Ryan doing anyway?
How did you? I mean, you and I know some other people you really don't like.
I know, but I'm a trained investigator. I did some empathy there. I stepped right in your shoes. I know what you're doing.
You did.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
You did.
What's Ryan Riley say?
And so obviously Ryan, being Ryan, he's reveling in this public, dispute that's going on right now.
Of course,
he's loving it.
Yeah, weird because he's on my side on this one. I'm sure.
Right. And so this is exactly what he said to me this morning. He said, this is the same person, talking about Julie, he said, who believes that every single person in the Capitol building by design must burn to death if the building is ever on fire. And I'm like, what? And he said, oh yeah. He said, Julie, for 3 years now, continues to push the idea that there's some secret magic button on the second floor of the Capitol that unlocks all of the magnetic doors. And that is an area right there that if you go look at what happened, and you have had the opportunity to look at all the video that I've seen related to the Capitol, is, you know, there's this one incident where this one guy goes over to the east door.
Yep.
He's come through from the west. He's worked his way all the way through the other side of the building. He goes to the east door. He pushes on the bar, you know, like all these exit doors have. He pushes on the bar. It doesn't open. So he looks up over his shoulder, points upstairs to something, and then goes back to the bar, pushes again, and it opens.
Right.
Well, everybody has said that what he did is he went and he pointed to the guy that had access to the magic button that releases all the magnetic locks. No, there's a sign on a pedestal right in front of the door that says, depress the bar for 3 seconds, and then 15 seconds later, it will open.
Which is a fire hazard.
It's DC fire code.
Sure.
Every building in the city.
That actually came up in our chat earlier. People wanted to know, were there magnetic locks? Was there a way to undo it? And the answer you've just given is a basic sign and basic fire safety. You can't bar the doors to a building for people to egress.
Right. That's right. And that's why Congressman Bowman, you remember when he went and tried to stop the vote, and he went and he set off the fire alarm.
Right.
Did you notice the first thing that he did is he removed the signs? You know what those signs says? Depress the bar for 3 seconds, and 15 seconds later, it will open.
And make an alarm.
This is exactly, and he took the signs down because he knew what he was doing.
Sure. Oh yeah. I mean, I think we all kind of knew that. Obstruction of official proceeding. He's been charged 1512, or is that just that's good if you're a congressperson?
No, not yet.
Just
not
you,
yet.
just you and Trump and 1,000+ other J6ers. Very cool.
Right.
Very cool. Really happy to do it. Okay. Yeah. I'm going to throw your social media here. People can follow you. Give a pitch if you would. I'm on the screen instead of you, but there you are. TPC4 USA. Steve Baker joining us by phone. You guys can follow him there. You got anything you want to pitch your Blaze site as well?
Yeah, I mean, everything that we're doing on the Blaze is of course, you know, theblaze.com, you know, has a paywall now because the Blaze has gone ad free. And I know people complain about, you know, paying $3 a month for access, but, you know, we used to pay a lot more for our newspaper, you know, delivery. So all I'm saying, I don't have a code to give you, you know, this is not a sales pitch, but everything that is behind the Blaze, you can find it either under my name, Steve Baker, but they've also given me a unique URL just for my January 6th investigations. And that's theblaze.com/truth. Do you know what a burden that is, Kyle?
Oh, you mean when you have to actually say things that are true because you've been told that that's the name of your URL?
When your company gives your work its own unique URL and they say truth, that's why I struggled for a week over this issue that we've talked about today.
That's right.
Is I was sitting on the truth and I was scared to present it because I knew there would be hell to pay.
That's the worst part for me. That's the worst part for you, is that there's no clout chasing on this. There's no glory in telling other people that they're mistaken. We don't want them to be mistaken. I don't want them to be mistaken. I want them to be correct. That's why we reach out privately. But when you're rebuffed and everybody around you is rebuffed and all the people that are actually knowledgeable in this field are rebuffed, and then they call you an op. Dan Bongino calls that the dipsy-do flipperoo, which is to say that they accuse you of what they're doing. I hope that that's not what's happening here. It's hard to see it any other way. George Hill saw the same sort of stuff. We independently look. It looks like, and it doesn't have to be, here's the funny thing, and I'll tell you this, Steve, because I think this is true. It doesn't have to be an op being run by people like Julie Kelly or Dan or anybody else. It can be an op being run by social media algorithms that's pushing for division. And that is a big, big likelihood, in my estimation. I would say that with medium confidence, that we are seeing algorithmic boosting of stories that create division, which is what makes Ryan Riley happy. And it makes a bunch of these people on the political left thrilled to see that we are arguing over the 1 or 3 or 5% of things that we don't agree on 100%, because it's distracted everybody from the 95% of what we do agree. And we do agree on most of the things. And we even agree on, like I said, there's very little daylight between our positions. The difference is I'm really, really hyper-focused on accuracy. Even though nobody's going to ever ask me to come testify in front of Congress because they know how impolite I'm willing to be. And I'm really willing to be, willing to be mean. But I just think that it matters. And I won't do it. I won't say things that I know are false because it's convenient. It turns out that's why I don't have friends at the FBI.
Yes, that's exactly right. So, well, man, hey, look, it's been awesome, great. I'm sorry we had the hotel Wi-Fi signal problems here, and but that's okay. I would rather look at just that photo than my morning mug anyway. So
you know what's good? It pushes me to do better on the visual. So folks, if you didn't see if you're listening on any of the audio channels, Spotify or whatever, iHeart, on Apple, you didn't get to see me scrambling on the back end to create a visual that looks appropriate, and I think I did okay. The folks in the chat are like, man, Kyle's pretty quick at doing this stuff. It's like I have a skill set because I have to have a skill set because I got to do this job. Because I don't have a Fed job to lean on and I don't get any Soros money like you were apparently accused of. It turns out this is what I do for a living. And I take my profession, whatever it may be, whether it be investigator, whether it be paramedic, whether it be finance analyst at a movie studio, which I've done all those things. I take it really seriously, and because it's a reflection of me in the world. So we did an okay job. I think we scrambled, we made it work. I'll cut out some of the ugly audio earlier so people who are listening after the fact won't realize it. But thanks for giving me the time today, Steve. Thanks for chatting with me while you're sitting in a hotel room and running around doing your work.
Yeah, man. Thank you as always. I didn't want to get even as explicit as we did today, but it was good to get it off my chest. And I think we did so respectfully. As I said before, I have had great respect for Julie's work. As I said, I praised her the day before she dropped this, and now I'm the villain in her world. I said, okay, well,
there's no villains here. There's just,
we agree.
There's just mistakes.
We agree 95% of the time, we should be able to respectfully come to a different conclusion that other 5%.
That's all it's about. Team Truth, theblaze.com/truth. Check out Steve Baker. Thanks for joining me, buddy. We'll do it again soon, I'm sure, whenever the next thing happens. Just like we played on the clip, when you're out in the world looking for anything, which is what you do, I know, you're likely to find something because of all the things. Many of them will fit the bill. Thanks for being on the show and talking about the method with me, bud.
Thanks, Kyle.
All right. We're going to say goodbye to Steve. We appreciate all of you guys and there it is. That's Steve dropping off the line. Thanks for your attention. If any of you want to go out there and push aggressively and tell Julie Kelly that she should jump on my program and talk with me, I can be polite. I don't even mind if people offend me. I was a federal agent. I was a paramedic. I had people tell me terrible things because they were in pain or because they were upset about things that were going on. I didn't cause their emergency. I was trying to help it, but they still blame you because you're the person that's there and you're not part of the family. I've had people scream at me when they're massively overweight and diabetic and hypertensive, family member drops dead and we're doing CPR and they're screaming at me. It's not my fault. I don't take it personally, it turns out. I do after the fact, but not in the moment. And here, I took it personally before I came on the show. That's what we do. We bring it on. I'm just going to remind you that if you think that your opinions are the only ones, and oftentimes I know that I'm correct about certain things, it's very frustrating to be that. But there are things that I will honestly just tell you, these are my opinions. It's not an opinion about how federal search warrants work. It's not an opinion. It's based on experience in 50% of the FBI's different area of responsibilities. I've touched operations in 23 different AORs. The FBI has 56. So I have done almost 50% of those places. I've gone all around the country. I've done them from Alaska down to Miami, and they always have the same rules. They're always the same. And that's not an emotional decision. Doesn't mean that it ever should have happened, by the way. So I always argue against pride, including myself. That's a big piece that I talk to myself about too. We got to avoid pride. If you guys want to support the program, I'm going to throw a couple up here real quick. You can go to madhatjerky.com/Kyle. You can order some jerky. Use promo code Kyle to save 20%. If you guys want to go to mypillow.com/Kyle, you can use promo code Kyle there to save up to 50%. All great deals. And lastly, and I'll just squeeze it in here, thesuspendables.com. Promo code Kyle will save you 10% over there, and you can get your own very handsome blue Kyle Seraphin Show, the Kyle Seraphin Show t-shirt if you're so inclined, and support my buddy Garrett Boyle, who had safe travels on the way back. I want to thank Steve, who is off the line, but he'll hear this later. I do appreciate people that are committed to truth. It's not fun to be arguing against your friends. That's not why we do it. We do it because we care about what is true and what is real, and we try to humble ourselves in order to get to the bottom of this stuff. If you give the left room to operate, they will hold us to our own standards, and our own standards should be truth. It is. All right. Do I have a palate cleanser for today? Of course I have a palate cleanser, folks. You guys want a little break? Here we go. Take a deep breath. Claimed to be the dumbest criminal in America. I'm going to push back on that after we play it. Here we go. And I'll read you a 5-star just after this. Oh, that's not it. Hold on. Video. Here we go.
Should be present via Zoom.
Mr. Harris, are you driving?
Actually, I'm pulling into my doctor's office, actually. So just give me 1 second. I'm parking right now.
Hey. You stationary?
I'm pulling in right now at this second. Yes, I am.
All right. What are we doing?
Your Honor, we are respectfully requesting an adjournment in this matter, up possibly 2 to 4 weeks that the court would allow.
So maybe I don't understand something. This is a driving while license suspended?
That is correct, Your Honor.
And he was just driving. And he didn't have a license.
Is with the charges, Your Honor, yes.
No, I'm looking at his record. He doesn't have a license. He's suspended and he's just driving.
That is correct, Your Honor.
I don't even know why he would do that. So defendant's bond is revoked in this matter. Defendant is to turn himself into the Washington County Jail by 6 p.m. today. Failure to turn himself in will result in a bench warrant with no bond.
Should be present via Zoom.
This poor guy. Listen, let me give you a different take on this, okay? This man had a court appearance by Zoom, and he also had a doctor's appointment. And some of you who deal with doctors have told me it's very, very difficult to maintain a doctor's appointment if you cancel it. I think we should give this guy a break. He managed to do 2 things at once. He kept 2 appointments. He was on time. A lot of people in this country can't make an appointment. He kept 2 appointments. Come on, Judge, where's the leniency here? But let's just say if your court appointment and your Zoom arraignment is because you're driving without a license, it's probably not smartest for you to go out there and film yourself while driving and admit to the judge that you did the thing that you're alleged to have done and giving him actual evidence with his own eyes. That's just a facepalm moment where you go, come on, man. What are you doing? Just do it from outside. What are you doing? Oh, I had a friend drop me off at the doctor's office or Uber, as you guys said. There's a lot of options. Oh, well, listen, that's a tough situation for that man, but it is pretty funny. And somebody pointed this out to me and said, listen, what if we didn't actually deal with fraudulent voting in 2020? What if there's millions and millions of this guy out there? Are there millions of people that would do a Zoom call with a judge on a suspended license while driving their own vehicle? The answer is probably yes, if we're being totally honest. I think we just have to admit that. Folks, if you got any comments, if you got sarcastic remarks, if you have specific questions for the Kyle Seraphin Show, you can do so at kyleseraphin.com. Don't click I have a question or don't type I have a question. Just send your question. It's the little contact me part. If you're listening anywhere, make sure you've hit the like button, whether you're on YouTube, whether you're on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin, or you are over on X Twitter. And these are all of the sponsors that keep our program going today. We hope you enjoyed it. I know we went a little bit long. I think this stuff is so important that we understand the method, the rubric, that we evaluate what it looks like for truth. Here's our 5-star review of the day coming from Jay Milles. By the way, you guys really came through in a huge way when I asked you to come out and overwhelm the algorithm. So keep doing it. This one is 5 stars. My daily go-tos, you, Dan Bongino, Glenn Beck, and coffee. Detailed, timely information I can't get anywhere else. Thank you for your insight. Thank you for your 5-star review. Look forward to getting more of those, folks. Set it up. Put them all up there. Let's overwhelm this algorithm. We're at 980. We are just on the threshold of crossing that 1,000, which is really cool. I feel like they were throwing us back, but you guys are overwhelming it because a bunch of them came in on May 20th and 21st and 22nd. So send me a few more of those suckers and let's push it over the edge. And until then, we'll do Friendly Friday tomorrow. Hope you guys have a wonderful day. God bless you. And I will see you again in the morning.
Thanks for listening to the Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram at Kyle Seraphin.